Hi, today we will start our story, and believe me, what happens next will shock you to the core. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now. It's always interesting to see who's joined us. Now, get comfortable, because we're starting. The cold wind of Michigan rustled through the quiet streets of the small town, and Sasha, a young man of 23, pulled his jacket tighter around him. He had just finished a long day of work at a construction site, his hands covered in dust and calluses, his mind on little else but the long walk home. The town had always felt like it was stuck in time. Quiet, slow, with only the occasional car passing down the narrow streets. Yet tonight something was different. Sasha lived in a modest apartment on the outskirts of the town, barely a block away from the old brick houses that lined the main street. His life was simple. He worked hard, didn't cause trouble, and kept mostly to himself. He had no close friends, no real family to speak of. It was easier that way. Less to worry about, fewer complications. Still, there was always a sense of loneliness that hung in the air around him, something he couldn't quite shake off. As he walked past the houses, he noticed the odd flicker of light that broke the monotony of the darkening evening. It was a strange glow, not the usual yellow warmth from street lamps, but something far more intense. It reminded him of a flare, a warning. His pace slowed for a moment as the distant light caught his attention. He looked up. Fire. His heart skipped a beat. The glow was coming from the house on the corner, the one that had been for sale for months before a family moved in. A young couple and their little boy. Sasha didn't know them well, but he'd seen them around. The boy couldn't have been older than 5, and the couple always seemed nice enough, though quiet. Panic set in as he broke into a sprint. The fire was already fierce. He could see it from the street. The front porch was entirely engulfed in flames, and thick smoke billowed from the windows, curling upwards like an angry serpent. The first thought that crossed his mind was to get out of the way, to avoid getting involved. The fire department would be here soon, right? But then he heard it. Screaming, frantic cries for help, a child's voice. Without thinking, Sasha's instincts kicked in. He had to help. He couldn't just stand by. His body moved on its own as he rushed towards the house, his mind trying to process what was happening. As he reached the front steps, the heat from the fire nearly knocked him back, the flames dancing at the edges of the doorway. He hesitated for just a moment, the full realization of danger finally hitting him. But then he heard the voice again, louder now. The child was still inside. "Help!" came the panicked cry, sharp and desperate. Sasha didn't think twice. He kicked the front door hard, hearing the wood splinter beneath his boot. The door flew open, smoke immediately filling his lungs. He coughed, his eyes stinging, but he kept moving, following the sound of the child's cries. The house was a maze of fire and heat. The kitchen was fully engulfed in flames, the walls blackened, and the smoke so thick he could barely see. His heart pounded in his chest as he moved deeper into the house, using the faint light from the fire to guide him. The boy's cries led him toward the back of the house. He found the child standing in front of a window, terrified, the flames dangerously close. The small face was streaked with tears, and the boy's tiny hands reached out for help. "Hey, it's okay. I've got you," Sasha said, his voice trembling with urgency. Without thinking twice, he reached out, grabbed the boy by the arms, and pulled him toward the door. The heat was unbearable, the fire licking at his back as he carried the child through the smoke-filled house. It felt as though the world was closing in on them, the flames creeping closer with every step. Finally, they reached the back door. Sasha kicked it open with one powerful motion and burst into the cold night air, the boy still clutching him tightly. His breath was coming in sharp gasps, his body trembling from the rush of adrenaline. He barely registered the sound of sirens as he ran toward the curb, where the boy's parents had gathered. The parents rushed forward, their faces pale with shock. The mother grabbed the boy from Sasha's arms, her hands shaking as she pulled him into her embrace. "Oh God, thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The father stood beside them, his expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. Sasha stepped back, his heart still racing. He had done it. He had saved the boy. But just as he began to breathe a little easier, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. A figure standing at the edge of the yard, watching. It was Jack, a man in his 40s who lived 2 houses down. Jack was one of those types who always seemed to know everything about everyone. He was often critical of newcomers, and, for reasons Sasha couldn't quite put his finger on, had always treated him with an air of suspicion. Jack's gaze was fixed on him, cold and unreadable. Sasha felt an uncomfortable chill run down his spine. The fire trucks arrived moments later, their sirens wailing as they pulled into the street. The firemen rushed to the house, starting to put out the flames. Sasha stood there, trying to catch his breath, still stunned by the events of the evening. But Jack's eyes never left him. The silence between them was heavy, charged with something Sasha couldn't identify. He shook it off, telling himself that it was just the aftermath of the fire playing tricks on him. "Are you all right?" the mother of the boy asked, her voice trembling as she checked the child, who was now safe in her arms. "Yeah, I'm fine," Sasha replied, his words coming out hoarse. But before he could say anything more, Jack walked away without saying a word, disappearing into the shadows. Sasha stood there for a few more moments, staring after Jack, and then turned his attention back to the house. The fire was mostly out now, but something felt off. He couldn't explain it, but he had a nagging feeling that this wasn't over. Something wasn't right. The events of the night had only just begun to unfold. The following morning, the town was still reeling from the events of the night before. News of the fire spread quickly, as it always did in small towns. But what disturbed Sasha wasn't the sympathy or the recognition he received from the few who knew him. It was the whispers, the ones that started right after the fire trucks had left. Sasha had hoped that after saving the boy, the ordeal would be over, that the fire would become nothing more than a bad memory. But the faces he passed in the streets were different now. There was something more in their eyes, something he couldn't put his finger on. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just been thrust into something much bigger than a simple act of heroism. It was just after noon when the first call came. He was sitting at the small kitchen table of his apartment, a cup of cold coffee in front of him, trying to gather his thoughts. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his stupor. It was from Kelsey, a woman he had worked with at the construction site for the past year. "Hey, Sasha." Her voice crackled over the line. "Are you okay? People are talking. They're saying you might have started the fire." Sasha blinked, momentarily stunned. He wasn't sure how to respond. "What? Who's saying that?" "I don't know," Kelsey replied. "But I heard it from Karen down at the diner. She said Jack—" Sasha's stomach clenched at the mention of Jack's name. "Said he saw you at the house before the fire started. Is that true?" "I didn't start the fire," Sasha said, his voice rough, though he didn't even realize it until he spoke. He could feel the heat of panic rising in his chest. How could anyone think that? "Of course you didn't," Kelsey said quickly. "But you need to be careful. People around here, they're just looking for someone to blame. I don't know, but maybe talk to the sheriff or something." Sasha ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady his breathing. "Yeah. Thanks, Kelsey." After hanging up, Sasha sat in silence. His mind raced. The fire had been an accident. He had saved the boy. He had risked his life to get him out. So why was everyone so quick to believe the worst? Why was Jack suddenly so insistent that he was guilty? He needed answers. By the time the afternoon sun dipped low in the sky, Sasha's thoughts had stewed long enough to boil over. He couldn't just sit around and wait for more rumors to spread. He had to find out what was happening. He decided to go back to the site of the fire. Maybe there was something he had missed. Maybe he could find evidence that could prove his innocence. He needed to see the house again, to retrace his steps from that night. There had to be something, anything, that would show he wasn't responsible. As he approached the house, he saw it was still partially blocked off with yellow caution tape. The fire trucks were gone, but a few officers remained, surveying the damage. They were talking to a woman he didn't recognize. She was older, wearing a dark coat and sunglasses, and was gesturing animatedly toward the charred remains of the front porch. Sasha's stomach churned. He tried to push the thought of being involved in something criminal from his mind, but it clung to him like smoke. He was about to turn around and leave when he heard a familiar voice from behind him. "Hey, Sasha." He turned to see Sheriff Thompson, a burly man in his mid-40s. Thompson had always been a no-nonsense type. He knew Sasha, but not well. They'd exchanged pleasantries at the bar, shared a drink once or twice, but that was about it. "Sheriff," Sasha said, his voice tight. "I just wanted to ask a few questions about last night. I heard some things. People are talking, and I don't want there to be any misunderstandings." Thompson eyed him for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Come on, let's take a walk." The sheriff led Sasha away from the others, toward a small bench near the edge of the property. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows over the blackened remains of the house. "People are talking," Thompson said bluntly. That's true. I heard a few things myself. The thing is, Sasha, I've been around this town long enough to know when something doesn't add up. Sasha's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? There's something strange about all this, the sheriff continued, his voice lowering. I've talked to a few of the neighbors, and they mentioned seeing you near the house a couple of days before the fire. One of them even mentioned seeing you with a canister, a gasoline can to be specific. Sasha recoiled. That's not true, I know you didn't, Thompson interrupted. But the problem is, other people think you did. And once a story like that starts circulating around here, it's hard to shake. Sasha's head was spinning. Who's spreading this stuff? Who's saying I had anything to do with it? Thompson sighed. That's the part I'm trying to figure out. Jack is making a lot of noise, but there's something else. There's a woman too. A real estate agent named Marissa who's been in town for about a year now. She's been sniffing around, asking questions. I don't trust her. Do you think she's behind it? Sasha asked. Could be, Thompson said. But that's something I'll need time to look into. Sasha nodded, feeling the weight of the sheriff's words sinking in. What now? The sheriff glanced at him. You stay out of sight for a while. Don't give anyone another reason to doubt you. I'll see what I can find. Before Sasha could respond, Thompson turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the growing shadows. As Sasha stood there, his mind spun. There was no way he had caused that fire, but someone was making sure the evidence pointed to him. And the deeper he dug, the more tangled the web became. But one thing was clear. There was more to this fire than just an accident. Much more. The following days dragged on with a sense of growing unease. Sasha tried to go about his daily routine. Work, eating alone at the diner, coming home to the quiet apartment. But it was clear that the fire was far from over for him. The whispers had only intensified. The stares from strangers as he walked down the street, the hushed conversations in the corner of the diner. It was as though the entire town had decided that Sasha was guilty, whether he was or not. But what troubled him the most wasn't the growing suspicion from the townspeople. It was the persistent feeling that someone, somewhere, was pulling strings behind the scenes. Sasha had been thinking about what Sheriff Thompson had said. He knew the sheriff wasn't just being cautious. He was suspicious too. The mention of the real estate agent, Marissa, had sparked a small flame of curiosity in Sasha's mind. He hadn't thought much about her before, but now she seemed to be the key to unlocking the mystery of why he was being framed. Marissa had been in town for over a year, but no one seemed to know much about her. She didn't speak often with the townspeople, always remaining polite but distant, her face an unreadable mask. Yet, Sasha couldn't help but wonder why someone like her was suddenly so interested in the fire. He had to find out more. The opportunity came on a Friday afternoon. Sasha was walking home from work when he saw Marissa standing by her car, talking to a man in a dark suit. They were standing at the edge of the property where the house had burned down, near the ruins of the porch. Sasha hesitated for a moment, debating whether or not to approach them. He didn't know why, but there was something about the way she spoke to the man that made him uneasy. Marissa was pointing toward the house and the man was nodding, taking notes on a pad. From the look on his face, he wasn't just interested in the fire. He was studying it, examining the aftermath as though it were a business deal. Sasha's gut told him that something wasn't right. He had to know who this man was and why he was talking to Marissa. As he walked past them, trying to act casual, he overheard snippets of their conversation. The insurance payout will be substantial, the man was saying in a low voice, but we'll need to make sure everything is clean. No loose ends. Don't worry, Marissa replied, her tone smooth, almost reassuring. Everything's in place. The fire will be considered an accident, and the investigation will clear itself up. It's perfect. Sasha's heart skipped a beat. Insurance payout? Loose ends? It was becoming clear that this fire was no accident at all. Someone was playing a much bigger game, and Sasha was stuck in the middle of it. He didn't want to get involved, but he knew he had no choice. He had to learn everything he could about Marissa and this man. Who were they really, and why had they targeted him? Later that evening, Sasha sat at his usual booth in the diner, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to figure out his next move. His mind was racing and he couldn't stop thinking about Marissa's words. Insurance, accident, clean. It didn't sound like a simple case of arson. It sounded like a calculated scheme, something far more sinister. Sasha needed help, and he knew he wasn't going to find the answers by himself. The first person he thought of was Kelsey. She was one of the few people he still trusted, and although they didn't know each other well, she was sharp. She could help him figure out what was going on. He called her after dinner. "Kelsey, I need your help," Sasha said, his voice low. "I've found something, and it's bad. I need to know more about Marissa. She's not who she says she is." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Marissa? The real estate agent? What are you talking about, Sasha?" "I overheard her talking to someone. They were discussing the fire, and it sounds like they planned it. They're talking about insurance payouts and making sure everything looks like an accident." "Whoa," Kelsey said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That's huge. But why are they involving you? Why would they frame you?" "That's what I need to find out," Sasha replied. "I need to get to the bottom of this. Can you help me look into her?" Kelsey sighed. "I'll see what I can do. I have a friend who works at the county clerk's office. I'll ask him to look up anything on Marissa. Property records, business connections, anything that might be relevant." Sasha's heart lifted slightly. "Thanks, Kelsey. I owe you one. Just stay safe, okay? Don't do anything stupid." "I won't," Sasha said, though he wasn't sure he could promise that. The next few days felt like a blur of tension and uncertainty. Every conversation Sasha had seemed to carry an underlying sense of suspicion. The local coffee shop employees whispered behind his back when he ordered his morning coffee. People he passed on the street avoided eye contact. No one said anything outright, but the weight of their gazes was enough to make him feel like a criminal, guilty of something he hadn't done. Sheriff Thompson's warning echoed in his mind. Stay out of sight for a while. Don't give anyone another reason to doubt you. But it wasn't enough. Sasha couldn't just hide. He couldn't pretend everything would be okay while a conspiracy was unfolding around him. The breakthrough came when Kelsey called him late one evening. "Sasha, you won't believe this," she said, her voice full of urgency. "Marissa's not just a real estate agent. She's connected to a shell company that's been linked to a number of shady deals. Property scams, insurance fraud, you name it. I got my friend to dig deeper, and it looks like she's been in town for less than a year, but she's already managed to get her hands on several properties. All of them are listed as vacant or in need of repair, but it doesn't add up. There's something off about the way she's been buying and selling these places." Sasha's blood ran cold. "So, what's her angle in all this?" "She's been flipping these properties for quick profits," Kelsey continued. "But there's more. She's been involved in at least 2 insurance claims, both of which were suspiciously high for the damage done. I think the fire was part of a bigger plan to claim insurance money on that property. But they needed someone to blame, and you were in the wrong place at the wrong time." Sasha sat back in his chair, the weight of Kelsey's words sinking in. He was being framed for something he hadn't done, but why? What did Marissa and the other man hope to gain by targeting him? He needed to find out more, before it was too late. Sasha's mind spun as he sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the phone in his hand. Kelsey's revelation about Marissa and her shady dealings was both a relief and a growing concern. At least now he knew there was something more to this story. Something that went beyond simple arson. But with every piece of the puzzle he uncovered, the more dangerous things became. His first instinct was to go directly to the sheriff, but he knew better than to trust anyone too quickly. After all, Marissa and the mysterious man she was working with seemed to have a network of their own. The sheriff could be part of that network, or worse, might just be unaware of the full scope of the corruption. Instead, Sasha knew he had to take matters into his own hands. He needed more information, proof that could not be ignored. The idea of confronting Marissa was tempting, but Sasha wasn't sure how much time he had before she disappeared or escalated the situation further. He needed to be cautious. But first, he had to gather everything Kelsey had discovered. Sasha called Kelsey back late that night, his voice tinged with urgency. "You said Marissa's been flipping properties. Do you know where she's been getting the money from? Any investors or backers?" "I'll dig further," Kelsey said. "But I found something that might help. Marissa's name came up in a few property records. But there's one thing that stands out. There's a bank in town, Wells and Blake, that seems to have been involved in her recent transactions. They've processed large sums of money for her. If you can get your hands on any of the records they've kept on her, you might find a trail to follow." "Good. I'll check it out tomorrow. You're sure about this?" "Absolutely. Just be careful, Sasha. I don't like where this is going. People like Marissa don't get mixed up in all this unless they're dangerous." "I will be," Sasha said, his heart racing with anticipation. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous this game seemed to get. But now he had a clearer target. Marissa's connections, the mysterious man, the fire. All of it had been part of a larger plan. The next morning, Sasha woke up early, the sky still dark with the early hours of the day. His mind buzzed with thoughts of the sheriff, Marissa, and the shady dealings that had turned his life upside down. He needed to move quickly. He had no idea how far this conspiracy reached, but if he didn't act soon, the truth might be buried before he could expose it. The town bank was a small, nondescript building, one of those places you could easily overlook if you weren't paying attention. But Sasha knew better than to underestimate it. If Kelsey's hunch was right, Wells and Blake had been funneling money into Marissa's schemes. All he had to do was figure out how. He walked into the bank just as it opened, the bell above the door chiming with a soft jingle. A few early risers sat at desks in the lobby, their eyes flicking up briefly before returning to their paperwork. The receptionist at the front desk barely glanced up as Sasha approached. "I need to speak to someone about account records," Sasha said, his voice calm but firm. "Specifically, for Marissa Wexler." The receptionist gave him an odd look but typed something quickly into her computer. After a moment, she looked back up at him, her expression guarded. "I'm afraid we can't release information about clients without proper authorization. You'll have to make a request through the appropriate channels." Sasha wasn't about to back down. "I don't have time for paperwork. I'm investigating a serious matter, and Marissa's transactions are a key part of it. I'm sure you don't want to get involved in something illegal, do you?" The receptionist hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She glanced toward the back office, as though considering whether to press the matter further. Finally, after a long moment, she gave him a small nod. "Fine, but you'll have to talk to the manager." Sasha's pulse quickened. This was the break he needed. He followed the receptionist down a narrow hallway to the back office, where a man in his 50s was typing away at his desk. He looked up when they entered, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Sasha. "What's this about?" the manager asked, his tone abrupt. "I'm looking into the financial activities of one of your clients, Marissa Wexler," Sasha said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I have reason to believe that some of the money she's been processing through your bank is part of a larger scheme. I need access to her records." The manager's eyes darted to the receptionist, and she quickly excused herself, leaving them alone. Sasha could see the hesitation in the man's face, and for a moment, he thought the conversation might end there. But then, to his surprise, the manager leaned back in his chair and sighed. "I don't know who you are or what you're really after," the manager said, his voice low. "But if you're serious about this, you'll need to get out of town as soon as possible. Marissa is no one to mess with. She's dangerous." Sasha's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" The manager leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "The money she's been processing here. It's not just for real estate. She's been laundering it. I don't know all the details, but I know this. The people she's connected to aren't the kind of people you want to cross. You need to leave before it's too late." Sasha felt a knot form in his stomach. He had come this far, and now it seemed like the walls were closing in. "I'm not going anywhere. I need the records, and I need them now." The manager stood up, his face hardening. "You don't understand. You're in over your head. You want to find out what's really going on? You won't get answers from me. But I can tell you this. Marissa and her friends? They're not just playing with fire. They're the fire." Before Sasha could respond, the manager turned and walked out of the room, leaving him standing there, alone. His mind raced with what he had just heard. If Marissa wasn't just an ordinary real estate agent, and if she was involved with dangerous people, then the fire wasn't the only thing Sasha needed to be worried about. As Sasha left the bank, the weight of the manager's warning hung heavily over him. He was no longer just trying to clear his name. He was trying to survive, and the only way out was through. The day after Sasha's tense conversation with the bank manager, the weight of the situation had fully settled over him. The cryptic warning had been unsettling, but it didn't change the fact that he had no choice but to keep pushing forward. Marissa, the real estate agent who had first seemed like just another small-town professional, was now at the center of a much larger, far more dangerous game. And somehow, he was caught in the middle of it all. Sasha spent the night trying to piece together everything he had learned. Marissa had connections, deep ones, and the fire was no accident. It had been a planned part of a much larger scheme, one that involved money laundering and potentially worse. But who was really behind all of this? Who were these shadowy figures pulling the strings? The more Sasha thought about it, the more it became clear that Marissa wasn't working alone. And the more he dug into her activities, the more the pieces didn't add up. The mysterious man she had been speaking to at the site of the fire, the one who had mentioned insurance payouts, was an unknown element. If Sasha wanted answers, he would need to get to the bottom of this, no matter the cost. He couldn't do it alone. His trust in Kelsey had only grown stronger over the past few days, and he knew she was the only person who could help him now. The phone rang just as Sasha was about to leave his apartment for another trip to the wrecked property. He answered quickly, not recognizing the number. "Sasha?" It was Kelsey's voice, urgent but calm. "We need to meet. Now." "Where?" he asked immediately. "There's a place near the edge of town. The old diner, not far from where the highway splits. I've got something you need to see." Sasha didn't hesitate. He knew whatever Kelsey had uncovered, it was something big. The diner was just as Sasha remembered it, dimly lit, with a few old booths lined along the walls. A handful of people were scattered around, but the place was quiet, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and grease. He spotted Kelsey at the back corner, her usual dark, disheveled hair and sharp eyes scanning the room as she waited for him. He slid into the booth across from her, nodding and greeting. "What have you got?" he asked, his voice low, glancing around to make sure no one was listening in. Kelsey leaned forward, her fingers wrapped around a small folder she had been holding. "I've been digging deeper into Marissa's finances. It's worse than we thought." She opened the folder and slid a stack of papers across the table. "These are the records from Wells and Blake. They've been processing transactions for her, but I found something strange. The money, some of it, it's been moving between several different bank accounts, including accounts tied to known criminals. This isn't just real estate deals. It's money laundering." Sasha felt his pulse quicken. "So, she's laundering money? That's how she's been funding everything?" Kelsey nodded grimly. "Exactly, and it gets worse. I managed to track some of the larger transfers. They're connected to a company called Firestone Investments. They specialize in high-risk ventures, including insurance fraud, arson for profit, and other illegal activities. It's the kind of company that would orchestrate a fire for the payout." Sasha's stomach dropped. "So, this wasn't just about flipping properties. She's been using this whole town to cover up her illegal activities, and I'm the scapegoat." Kelsey leaned back, her eyes narrowing with a mix of concern and determination. "You're not just a scapegoat. You were chosen. They knew you would be an easy target. A young guy with no family in town, no one who would question a sudden accusation. But that's what makes this whole thing even more dangerous." Sasha's thoughts began to swirl as he processed everything Kelsey was telling him. If Marissa and her accomplices had orchestrated this fire as part of a larger money laundering scheme, then they had the resources to manipulate the situation any way they wanted. He was a pawn in a game far beyond his understanding. "I don't care about being the scapegoat," Sasha muttered, his jaw tightening. "I just need to know who's behind it. Who's pulling the strings? I need names." Kelsey looked at him seriously, her face shadowed by concern. "I'm working on it. But right now, there's something else you need to be aware of. Someone's been following you." Sasha blinked. "What do you mean, following me?" "I don't know who they are," Kelsey said, lowering her voice. "But I've seen them a couple of times. Every time you leave the apartment, they're there. They know who you are and they're watching you. If you're not careful, they'll make their move." Sasha's heart began to race. He had sensed he was being watched, but hearing Kelsey confirm it made the situation even more real. "What do we do now?" Kelsey slid a piece of paper across the table. "I've got a contact, someone who can help us. They have information about Marissa's network, how deep it goes, and who's really backing her. But we need to be careful. The fewer people know about this, the better. This person can help us take the next step." Sasha looked at the paper, his mind racing. "How do we trust them?" Kelsey gave him a grim smile. "I've met them before. They're legitimate. But you need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it gets. I don't know how much longer we can stay in the shadows." Sasha pocketed the paper and stood up. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. The stakes had just gotten higher, and the walls were closing in. Marissa was a part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous than he had originally thought. He knew that in order to survive, he would need to outsmart those who had set their sights on him. He wasn't just fighting for his name anymore. He was fighting for his life. "Let's go," Sasha said, his voice steady now, his resolve hardening. Kelsey nodded, standing up as well. "We move quickly, but remember, don't trust anyone who might be connected to Marissa, not even the sheriff." Sasha's eyes narrowed. "I know." They stepped out into the cold air, the weight of their next move pressing down on them. The town felt smaller now, suffocating almost, as if the very ground beneath them was shifting. And Sasha knew one thing for sure. He was no longer a bystander in this game. He was in it now, for better or worse, and there was no turning back. The night was colder than usual, the wind biting at Sasha's skin as he and Kelsey walked briskly through the dark streets. The shadows of the town stretched long across the sidewalks, as if trying to conceal them from the world. Sasha could feel the tension in the air, thick with every step they took. They were on the edge now, each movement carrying the weight of the risk they were taking. The contact Kelsey had mentioned was someone named Doug, a man with a reputation for knowing things, for being able to find information that others couldn't. He was a former private investigator who had fallen off the grid after getting tangled in something he couldn't escape. Kelsey had worked with him once before and trusted him enough to bring him into this mess. But there were still questions about Doug, things Kelsey hadn't told Sasha, things she hadn't needed to. They arrived at an abandoned warehouse near the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes. The place looked run down, the kind of building you wouldn't want to walk into unless you had no other choice. There was a flickers of dim light coming from the inside, and as they approached, Sasha felt a shiver run down his spine. This was where things would either fall into place or shatter completely. Kelsey knocked twice on the metal door, the sound echoing into the night. There was a long pause before the door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 40s. He was tall, with graying hair and a hardened expression. His clothes were simple, old jeans, a leather jacket, and boots. But there was something about his presence that made it clear he wasn't someone you messed with. "Doug?" Kelsey asked, her tone steady. "Yeah, it's me," Doug replied, his voice gravelly. His eyes flicked over to Sasha, taking him in with a practiced glance. "You're the guy, huh? The one who got caught up in all this?" Sasha didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Doug's expression said it all. He knew what Sasha had been through, and he knew how dangerous things had become. The fact that Doug was still here, still offering his help, meant he was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. "Come on in," Doug said, stepping aside to let them through. Inside, the warehouse was eerily quiet, with only the hum of old fluorescent lights overhead breaking the silence. The place smelled of dust and rust, but there was a faint trace of something else in the air. Anxiety, maybe, or the sense that they were about to cross a line they couldn't uncross. Doug led them to the back of the warehouse, where a table was covered with stacks of papers, old maps, and a few dusty filing cabinets. He didn't sit down, though. Instead, he grabbed a chair and motioned for Sasha and Kelsey to take a seat. "So what's this about?" Doug asked, folding his arms. His eyes were sharp, focused. "I know Kelsey trusts me, but I need to know what I'm getting into here." Kelsey took a deep breath and slid the folder with Marissa's financial records across the table. "This is everything we know so far. Marissa's been laundering money through Wells and Blake, and there's a company involved, Firestone Investments. They've been behind some of the fraudulent activities around here, including the fire at that house. We're trying to figure out who's behind it all." Doug's eyes scanned the papers quickly, his brow furrowing as he processed the information. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair, letting out a long sigh. "You've got yourself in a real mess here," he said, his tone hardening. "Marissa's not just some small-time real estate agent. She's got connections that go all the way up. I've been tracking her for a while. Firestone Investments? That's just the tip of the iceberg." Sasha leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean? Who else is involved?" Doug paused for a moment, as if considering how much he should reveal. "Marissa's been working with a network of people who deal in illegal activities. I don't just mean insurance fraud or money laundering. I'm talking about organized crime, arson for hire, even people with connections to the local authorities. They're using places like this town to cover up their tracks, using innocent people like you as pawns in their game." Sasha's mind was reeling. He had known things were bad, but hearing it laid out like that made the weight of it all even more crushing. "So, the fire wasn't just about making money from a property deal. It was a part of something bigger, and now they're trying to pin it on me." "Exactly," Doug confirmed. "You were the perfect target. You're a newcomer, no family, no real ties. They knew you wouldn't be able to fight back, and they could blame everything on you when things went wrong." Sasha clenched his fists. "And what do you think they'll do next?" Doug met his gaze. "They'll do whatever it takes to protect themselves. They'll silence anyone who gets in their way, and they won't hesitate to use you as a scapegoat. The fire was just one part of their plan. If you want to stay alive, you need to act fast." Sasha's thoughts were racing, but there was one question that stuck out in his mind. Why help us, Doug? You're risking your life just by being here. Doug gave a cynical laugh. I've been risking my life for years. You think this is the first time I've tangled with people like this? But there's a line, you know? They've crossed it. They've hurt too many people, and now they're using you to cover their tracks. You didn't deserve this. Sasha nodded slowly. He didn't fully trust Doug yet, but he knew one thing. The man was telling the truth. Everything Doug had said fit with what he had uncovered. And if Doug was willing to help, then Sasha had no choice but to trust him for now. So, what's our next move? Sasha asked, his voice steady now, his resolve hardening. He wasn't going to let them get away with this, not anymore. Doug leaned forward, pulling a map out from one of the filing cabinets. He spread it across the table, showing Sasha and Kelsey a section of the town that Sasha hadn't paid much attention to before. It was an industrial area, the kind of place that people didn't visit unless they had a reason to. Firestone Investments has a warehouse here, Doug said, pointing to a spot on the map. It's where they do their dirty work. You can't just waltz in there, but I know a way inside. If you're going to take them down, that's where you need to start. It's risky, but it's the only chance you've got. Sasha didn't hesitate. Let's do it. Kelsey looked at him, concern flashing in her eyes. Are you sure? This could get ugly, Sasha. There's no turning back once we go in. I'm already in, Sasha replied. And I'm not walking away now. Doug gave a slow nod. Then we'll need to move quickly. The sooner we get in, the better our chances. They won't be expecting anyone to come after them. With that, they set their plan into motion, knowing that the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The deeper they went, the closer they got to the truth. But the fire was still burning, and the shadows of those who had set it were closing in fast.